He arrived at the party in an old pickup truck and was greeted with looks of disdain. But when they revealed who he really was, silence fell over the hall. The simple man everyone had underestimated was, in fact, one of the country's greatest entrepreneurs. Want to know what happened? Find out now. The sun was setting on the horizon when Jack Peterson parked his old F-100 pickup truck in front of the Andersons' mansion. The contrast was stark. The dusty vehicle stood out completely from the imported cars occupying the property's entrance. He adjusted his worn straw hat, a gift from his father, and observed his reflection for a moment in the stained rear-view mirror. The well-ironed plaid shirt and jeans, though simple, were clean. It was the best he could offer for an occasion like this. He hesitated for a moment before getting out. The invitation to that gala had arrived a week ago, bringing with it a wave of memories from his childhood, alongside Richard Anderson. 20 years had passed since they shared dreams and adventures on the family lands. Richard followed the traditional path: law school, a master's degree abroad, and took over the family business. Jack chose a different path, away from the spotlight and glamour of high society. As he crossed the impeccably maintained gardens, he felt the first strange looks. A couple, he in a tuxedo and she in a dress that certainly cost more than a tractor, whispered something between contained laughs. Jack kept his head high. Years of working under the Midwest sun had given him a dignity that no designer outfit could buy. "Excuse me, the staff entrance is around back," an affected voice intercepted him before he could reach the main staircase. It was a security guard with an unfriendly face. "I'm a guest," Jack calmly replied, extending the personalized invitation that Richard had sent. The guard examined the paper suspiciously, as if looking for signs of forgery. Inside the main hall, the ostentation was even more evident. Venetian crystal reflected the golden light of the chandeliers. Classical music filled the air, and the aroma of expensive perfumes mixed with that of elaborate canapes circulating on silver trays. "Well, look at that. Seems like someone got lost on the way from the farm," a young woman in a red dress commented loudly enough for everyone around her to hear. The group around her laughed without discretion. Jack calmly helped himself to a glass of champagne, ignoring the comments. His thoughts wandered to his own lands, where true value wasn't in crystals or silver cutlery, but in honest sweat and the satisfaction of seeing the crops grow. "Hey, you!" a drunken voice cut through his thoughts. It was Frank Miller, heir to a traditional family of cattle ranchers. "I don't think you understood the dress code of the party." Stumbling slightly, Frank approached with a glass of red wine. "Let me help you understand." The movement was quick and obviously intentional. The red wine spread across Jack's plaid shirt, forming a dark stain that stood out against the light fabric. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath, some laughing nervously, others watching with a mixture of embarrassment and amusement. "Frank!" The familiar voice cut through the environment like thunder. Richard Anderson, the host, was crossing the hall with firm steps. "Jack, my friend, it's been so long." The sincere embrace between the two friends caused a wave of confused whispers among the guests. Richard stepped back, keeping his hands on his friend's shoulders, and addressed those present with a smile that barely contained his indignation. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Jack Peterson, one of the largest agribusiness entrepreneurs in North America. His model sustainable agriculture farms are an international reference, and his reforestation project in the Pacific Northwest just received a UN award." The silence that followed was deafening. Frank Miller, still with the empty glass in his hand, seemed to have instantly sobered up. The young woman in the red dress was trying to discreetly hide behind a column. The entrance security guard was intently studying his own shoes. "Jack, I'm sorry for the reception," Richard continued. "Some people here seem to have forgotten. That class can't be bought in luxury boutiques." Jack just smiled, that calm smile of someone who knows their own worth. "Richard, my friend, don't worry. You know how it is. Some people confuse pedigree with character." He turned to Frank, who was still paralyzed. "As for the wine, it's no problem. Back on the farm, we learned that some stains only reveal the true character of those who made them." The buzz in the hall increased. Now those who had previously despised him were trying to discreetly approach, forcing smiles and rehearsing apologies. But Jack had already made his decision. With a sincere hug to Richard, he said goodbye. "I need to go, friend. Early tomorrow morning I have a video conference with Chinese buyers, and then I'm going to supervise the planting of the new crop. You know how it is? The land doesn't wait." As he walked back to his pickup truck, he could feel the gazes that were once filled with contempt now full of regret and admiration. The sound of his steps on the gravel was accompanied by remorseful whispers and frustrated attempts to start a conversation. Already on the road, with the night wind coming through the F-100's window, Jack smiled. Not for the money in his accounts, or the size of his lands, but for the certainty that his true wealth was in something that those people, with all their luxury and arrogance, seemed to lack: dignity. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. The news about what happened at the Andersons' party spread like wildfire through the local high society. In the days that followed, the story of the agribusiness entrepreneur mistaken for a farm worker became the preferred topic in elegant cafes and exclusive clubs in the city. Frank Miller, in particular, saw his reputation crumble quickly. No one wanted to be associated with the man who had publicly humiliated one of the country's biggest entrepreneurs. Meanwhile, Jack maintained his unchanged routine on his model farm, North Star Ranch. On the porch of the headquarters, a simple but comfortable building that preserved the original architecture of his parents' old house, he ate his breakfast, watching the sunrise. Sarah Collins, his executive assistant for over a decade, approached with a folder of documents and an understanding smile. "The newspapers won't stop calling," she commented, helping herself to coffee. "They want to do stories about the discreet, agribusiness billionaire. And there's more, the list of people trying to schedule meetings just keeps growing. It's impressive how quickly some people change their minds, isn't it?" Jack smiled, remembering Frank Miller's shocked face. "Let them talk, Sarah. Our priority now is the small producers training project. How's it progressing?" "Very well. We already have 50 families enrolled for the first cycle of training. Richard Anderson, in fact, called offering legal support for the project. He seemed quite affected by what happened at the party." The mention of his friend made Jack recall his childhood days. Richard had always been different from the rest of his family, keeping his feet on the ground despite his golden cradle. It was he who years ago offered the first loan that allowed Jack to start his empire. "You know, Sarah, some people think success is showing off imported cars and designer clothes, but real success is being able to help others grow along with you." At that moment, a pickup truck approached on the dirt road leading to the headquarters. To Jack's surprise, it was Helen Miller, Frank's sister, whom he knew only by sight. She got out of the vehicle with an elegance that contrasted with the rural environment, but her face showed an unusual humility for someone of her social position. "Mr. Peterson," she began, visibly nervous, "I came to apologize for my brother's behavior. He hasn't been well since our father handed over control of the family farms to me." Jack indicated a chair on the porch, offering coffee. Helen hesitated for a moment before accepting, her hands trembling slightly as she held the simple china cup. "Miss Miller, you didn't need to trouble yourself. Your brother—" "Helen, please," she interrupted. "Actually, I didn't come here just to apologize. Our farms are facing serious difficulties. The outdated management methods, the resistance to technology. We're losing competitiveness. She took a deep breath. "I would like to learn about your sustainable production methods." The request caught Jack by surprise. The Millers were known for their conservatism and resistance to change. Seeing Helen there, admitting her difficulties and seeking help, demonstrated a courage he didn't expect to find in the family. "You know, Helen, when I started, a lot of people doubted that sustainable agriculture could be profitable. They said it was a dreamer's thing. Today our farms produce twice the national average with half the environmental impact." Sarah, who was discreetly observing the scene, noticed something peculiar in the way Jack and Helen looked at each other. There was a spark there, something beyond professional interest. Perhaps it was destiny playing another of its tricks. After all, Who could have imagined that the disaster at the Andersons' party could pave the way for something like this? "Why don't we start with a tour of the farm?" Jack suggested, getting up. "I can show you our smart irrigation system and the crop-livestock integration project." Helen smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face in a way that Jack found inexplicably captivating. "I'd love that." As the two walked around the property, Sarah couldn't help but notice how her boss, always so formal and reserved, gestured animatedly explaining every detail of the operation. Helen, in turn, asked insightful questions that demonstrated a surprising knowledge of agribusiness. What neither of them knew at that moment was that this seemingly professional visit would be the beginning of a much bigger story, a story that would prove that sometimes life's greatest treasures arise in the most unexpected moments, and that a person's true value isn't in the surname they carry, but in the choices they make. 3 months passed since Helen's first visit to North Star Ranch. The partnership project between the Miller Properties and Jack's group was advancing by leaps and bounds, transforming not only the production methods, but also the lives of everyone involved. On a particularly pleasant autumn afternoon, Helen was supervising the installation of new irrigation systems on one of her family's farms. Her eyes sparkled as she saw the old degraded pastures giving way to a modern crop livestock integration project. Dressed in jeans, boots, and a plaid shirt, a look quite different from the designer clothes she used to wear, she made notes on her tablet while talking to the technicians. "Your sister has a natural talent for this," commented Richard Anderson, who was visiting the property to evaluate the progress of the project. Jack, by his side, couldn't disguise his admiring smile. "And you, my friend, aren't fooling anyone with that smile." "I don't know what you're talking about," Jack tried to deflect, but his blushing face betrayed him. "Oh, you don't? Then why have you been personally visiting all the Miller properties in the last few weeks, when you could perfectly delegate this to your team?" Before Jack could respond, they were interrupted by an unexpected arrival. Frank Miller, who hadn't been seen since the incident at the party, was crossing the field in his latest model Land Rover. His face showed a mixture of anger and resentment. "So this is it?" he shouted, getting out of the car. "First you publicly humiliate me, then you come here playing the savior of our farm." Helen quickly approached the group. "Frank, please, don't start. You know very well that Dad left the decisions in my hands because you—" "Because I what, Helen?" Frank interrupted her, his voice laden with bitterness. "Because I don't have your diplomatic touch? Because I say the truths no one wants to hear? Look at you, dressing like a hick." "Enough." Helen's voice sounded firm, surprising everyone. "You want to know the truth, Frank? Dad removed you from management because you were sinking our farms with your irresponsible decisions. While you were spending fortunes on parties and imported cars, our lands were dying." Jack and Richard observed the scene in silence, respecting the family moment. The employees discreetly moved away, giving privacy to the siblings. "And you think allying yourself with the farmer will save everything?" Frank provoked, casting a look of contempt at Jack. "This farmer, as you say," Helen responded, approaching her brother, "is teaching us more about modern agriculture in 3 months than we've learned in generations. Our lands are starting to produce again, Frank. The employees are motivated. Local communities are benefiting. Why can't you just accept?" Frank laughed bitterly. "Accept that my little sister is falling for a rich country boy, that our family tradition is being thrown in the trash because of some trendy sustainability projects?" It was Jack who stepped forward this time. "Mr. Miller, your father built an empire with hard work. The tradition you so strongly defend isn't in the clothes we wear or the cars we drive. It's in the commitment to the land and to the people who depend on it." "Spare me your motivational speeches," Frank growled, but something in his expression had changed. Maybe it was the way Helen and Jack stood side by side as if they naturally belonged to that place, that moment. Or maybe it was Richard's presence, a silent witness representing the bridge between the two worlds that Frank tried so hard to keep separate. "You have 2 choices, brother," Helen spoke softly. "You can keep clinging to a past that won't come back, or you can join us and help build the future of the lands our father loved so much." A gentle wind blew across the fields, rustling the leaves of the trees and bringing the scent of damp earth. Frank looked around at the modern machines, the irrigation systems, the employees working with purpose. For a brief moment, his face looked younger, more vulnerable. "I need to think," he finally muttered, returning to his car. Before leaving, he cast one last look at his sister and Jack. There was no more anger in his eyes, only a deep sadness, and perhaps a hint of regret. When the dust settled after Frank's departure, Richard put a hand on each of his friends' shoulders. "You know, sometimes the greatest transformations begin with the most difficult confrontations." Helen and Jack looked at each other, their hands discreetly meeting. The touch was simple but loaded with unspoken promises. There, under the evening sky, among transforming fields and changing hearts, a new story was beginning to unfold. A story about tradition and innovation, about pride and humility, about the transformative power of love and work. 6 months later, North Star Ranch was unrecognizable. The green fields stretched as far as the eye could see, interspersed with carefully maintained environmental preservation areas. The integration project with the Miller farms had become a national success story, attracting the attention of rural producers from all over the country. At the old farm headquarters, now transformed into a training center for small farmers, Jack watched the preparations for a special event. Banners announced the graduation of the first class of the training program, an initiative that was already changing the lives of dozens of families in the region. "Nervous?" Helen asked, approaching from behind and hugging him. In recent months, she had become not just a business partner, but also a life partner. Their relationship had blossomed naturally, like a well-planted seed in fertile soil. "A little," he admitted, turning to face her. "I never imagined that night at the Andersons' party would bring us here." The sound of more cars arriving caught their attention. Richard Anderson was getting out of his vehicle, accompanied by a group of international executives. The project had caught the attention of investors interested in sustainable agriculture, and Richard, as always, was helping to open doors. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. A familiar Land Rover parked near the training center, and Frank Miller got out of the vehicle. Unlike the last time they saw him, he was dressed simply in boots and jeans. His face, once always laden with arrogance, showed a new serenity. "Helen, Jack," he called, approaching hesitantly. "I came to apologize. For real this time." The silence that followed was broken by Helen, who stepped forward. "Frank, no, let me finish," he continued. "I've spent the last few months traveling, visiting agricultural projects across the country. I saw amazing things, met extraordinary people, and you know what I discovered? That I was wrong about everything." Jack extended his hand to Frank, who accepted it with a firm handshake. "It's never too late to start over," he said simply. "Actually," Frank continued, "I learned some interesting things about recovering degraded pastures. If you're interested." Helen's smile lit up the environment. For the first time in years, the Miller siblings were truly united, sharing not just a name but a purpose. The graduation ceremony was a success. 50 small farmer families received their certificates, but more than that, they received a new perspective on the future. Jack, in his speech, couldn't contain his emotion. "When I started on this land, I had only a dream and the memory of my father's teachings. Today I look at each of you and see the same sparkle in your eyes that he had. The land knows no surnames or titles. It responds to honest work and the respect with which we treat it." Richard, who watched everything with a satisfied smile, approached his friend after the ceremony. "You know, Jack, that invitation to the party was the best thing I ever did." The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, when Emily gathered everyone for a photograph. Jack, Frank, Richard, and the graduates positioned themselves in front of the farm's main house. As the photographer prepared to capture the image, a gentle breeze rustled the wheat fields in the background, as if nature itself wanted to participate in this moment. "Jack," Emily called softly, while the guests dispersed for the cocktail reception. "I have some news." Her smile had a special glow as she placed his hand on her stomach. Jack's eyes widened in understanding. There, between the sky and the earth they loved so much, they sealed their love with a kiss. witnessed only by the golden fields and the wind whispering through the trees. True wealth, after all, wasn't in titles or possessions, but in the bonds we build and the lives we touch. Dear listeners, we hope that Jack and Emily's journey has touched your hearts. To continue exploring equally moving stories about transformation and overcoming challenges, we've prepared a special playlist that you can find by clicking the link on the left. If this story about humility, love, and the power of transformation touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like. Every day we bring new stories that celebrate life's true values. Share with us in the comments which moment of this story touched you the most. We're eager to read your impressions and continue this journey together.